to Exeter, our second location. This is week 2 for you. Absolutely. Are we going to clap for Exeter every week? It's yeah, let's clap for Exeter every week. So awesome. We are so excited that we get to put Vital Point Church in Exeter, and we're excited for what God's going to do in your life this morning. And just lean in as you feel comfortable. All right, so Vital Point Church. I was reflecting on this again this week and realizing how important this church is for many of us. I began thinking about this idea of how we are a church that's designed to help people explore faith. It's very interesting to see how people come along. Maybe someone's invited you, someone's brought you, someone's paid you, you got here, and you heard there's free gifts if you're new, and you came here just to kind of get them off your back, but then all of a sudden, something begins to happen. Something begins to shift inside of you, and you begin to realize that there's a gap, there's an emptiness, or there's questions that you have, and you begin to explore. And I love that about this church. That we give room for people no matter where they are in their journey of exploring, whether you have a little bit of church experience or not, or very little, or lots. It doesn't matter. And we're also about trying to help you grow in that relationship. We would love to see people continue to develop the roots of their faith and so that they become strong and vibrant. We believe that faith is vital for our lives, that Jesus is vital. And so we move towards that. And what is so great about this, which I love about this church. I kind of joked that I would go here if I wasn't on staff. I would probably go to this church. Is that we together, no matter where we find ourselves, get to journey together. Church, unchurched, religious, irreligious, doesn't matter. Whether your life is squeaky clean or broken, it's all of us learning to grow together. I level the ground for us this morning because we're in week 2 of a series called Breakthrough, and we're going to talk about mindset today. We're going to talk about a very important area of our lives that I believe many of us are crippled by. And I believe it's something that's God is wanting me to teach on this morning, and I'll say it right up front, it's possible that it's going to have a part 2 next week. I've been sensing some of that already as I'm standing here today, realizing that the conversation probably needs to extend into next week as well, because I believe it's an important conversation. So this summer, my wife and I, we moved into the North London area, and we bought a house with air conditioning. What a summer to buy a house with air conditioning. And you might laugh and kind of shrug your shoulders at that and say, well, Ron, yeah, that's a no-brainer. But we lived 14 years in a house in Westmount with air conditioning. Oh, someone's like, oh. We had a boiler system with radiant heat, so there was no ducts in the house. And so every once in a while, when it got super hot, we would go to the basement and camp out down there when the boys were little. And then, we kind of just persevered through. But we bought this house with air conditioning. It's like a whole new world. Right? It's amazing. The first week we were in this new house, it was really super hot out, and the humidity was in the room, in the house, and outside. It was like, I said to my wife, I said, okay, maybe we should break down and use the air conditioning. So we closed the windows, we shut the doors, and we turned the air conditioning on, we set it, and there it ran. It ran, and I've never had this before, and I started panicking because it wasn't getting colder in the house. And so I was going over to the thermostat regularly, like I'm not kidding you, regularly. I had become obsessed with the temperature in the house, and it wasn't going down. And I would get up and I'd check it, and I'd say to my wife, it's not changing, what's wrong? And have you ever had these moments where you start to tell yourself a story? You start fabricating a story, right? Like, great, we just bought this house. I don't know how we're going to afford fixing the air conditioning. What if we have to buy a new air conditioner? What? And then I even started fabricating, how dare they sell us a house with a broken air conditioning unit? Should have done that inspection. We got caught up in the frenzy without conditions. And so I'm going up and I'm checking the temperature regularly, right? And my wife finally says, would you just stop? You're driving me crazy. I don't recommend this, but I looked at her and I said, how long was the drive? Was it short, long? Yeah. The couch is amazing. She's in Exeter right now. I had just become so wrapped up in this temperature in the house was not going down. See, sometimes what happens to us in life is something begins to whisper in our ear. Something begins to happen, and the whisper starts to become a little bit louder and a little bit louder, and before you know it, it's at 10. And you're so consumed at 10 that you keep checking the thermostat, and what happens after that is that anxiety and worry creep into our lives. And we become overwhelmed, and we begin to spin, sometimes completely out of control, but then we begin to spin. We're so overwhelmed, we're so stressed, anxiety and worry begins to take over, and we lie awake at night unable to sleep, and our brain can't shut off because we are so overwhelmed with what is going on. Last week I posted on my Facebook page, what are people anxious about, or what causes anxiety, and so on, and it just lit up with all the reasons. See, I don't think that anxiety and worry is on the rise. I think it's an epidemic. It's become the norm. And for some reason, we've just bought it. We've bought the Kool-Aid on this. It's just like, oh, it's just life. It's just how we live. Overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, worried. That's just the way it is. And so we just buy into it, and we live this way. And what ends up happening is we become so fractured. We become so broken. There's a distance between our head and our hearts. And then relationships get broken. Marriages and families become destroyed because anxiety and worry creep in. We become so overwhelmed. I think there's pieces of this that are contributing to it, is that we now are living in such a time where we are wondering if we are enough. We wonder if people will like or share. We wonder if we're going to pass or succeed. We wonder all these things, and they begin humming in the background of our life, and we begin to become overwhelmed with it. And it pulls us in. Now, this is not by any means a conversation to bash social media, but I think that's a contributing factor. It's completely rewiring us, and we're not even aware of it. That we look at the lives of other people. You notice how easily I just did that? My thumb is stronger than the rest of my fingers. Amazing how that happens. And we begin to look at the other people's lives, and they go, man, they're invited to every party going on campus, or wow, they got the life, they're living the dream. Like, look at their kids, they're always on bike rides, and the kids are always in line, and look, it's just amazing. And then we start comparing, and no, that's not real life, but we try to tell ourselves that, but then we become consumed, we become envious, and all of a sudden our world is spinning. And we go, what do I do? How do I break free from this? How do I have a breakthrough? See, we're having this conversation called breakthrough, and one of the things that we're beginning to realize is that one of the names of God is the God of the breakthrough, and this was something that was new to me, and I was fascinated by this idea that God is the God of the breakthrough. There's a verse in the part of the Bible called the Old Testament, and it's in Micah, and Micah 2 verse 13 says this: your leader will break out and lead you out of exile, out through the gates of the enemy cities, back to your own land. Your king will lead you, the Lord himself will guide you. That little verse there, that word break, is actually identifying the one who is doing the breaking. It is the title for the one who is doing the breaking. So therefore, it means that God is the God of the breakthrough. And there's some of us today that need to lean into this beautiful truth that God desires you to have a breakthrough in this area of your life, so that there can be closure, that there can be this, the gap between your head and your heart can begin to close, and you can live with unity and integrity, that you can live in a way that God intends you to live. Because when anxiety and worry take over our lives, we don't live the way God desires us to live. We live below that. And so this morning, I believe that some of us, if we're willing, if we're open, that God is going to be the God of your breakthrough today, And he's going to break through your anxiety. He's going to break through your worry. He's going to break through the loop that is right now happening inside of your head that keeps you awake at night, that keeps you overwhelmed and stressed to the limit. Now, just so you know, I don't say that just because I'm an over-enthusiastic preacher. I recognize that sometimes my enthusiasm and my excitement can kind of get in the way of some of these things, but I really do believe that today, that there are some of us that are going to experience a massive breakthrough, an unexpected breakthrough. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take you to a section of the Bible called 1 Peter, and I'm going to look at this section with you. We're going to walk through it. We're going to teach on it, and then at the end of the service, after our closing song, I'm going to lead you through a prayer. And we're going to do this at our Exeter site as well. Our site leader, Dave, is going to lead you guys through this as well. At the end of the service, we're going to lead us through a prayer that I believe is going to free some of us from anxiety and worry. Let me read for you probably one of the most familiar verses around this topic found in 1 Peter chapter 5. It says, "So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and at the right time he will lift you up in honor. Give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. Stay alert, watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Stand firm against him and be strong in your faith. Remember that your Christian brothers and sisters all over the world are going through the same kind of suffering you are." Now, let me explain this to you. And this is why it's so important that we gather together around passages like this so that we can learn together. These type of things are never designed to be done alone. So we get together and we learn about these things and we expose ourselves to what the scriptures are saying. The author of this letter is a guy named Peter, and Peter is writing a letter to encourage the Christians, the church, that are scattered in what we would call modern-day Turkey. And one of the things that Peter does in this letter, and he's a disciple of Jesus. He was around Jesus when Jesus walked on this earth. He had a blip of disloyalty to Jesus at a crucial moment, but then Jesus restores him, and then he is used by God to advance God's kingdom in this world. And this letter is a letter of encouragement. It's a pastoral, caring letter to these followers, and he's encouraging them. He's trying to prop them up. He's trying to encourage them. Here is why. There's a little word that is right at the end of the section I just read you. It says suffering. He says, brothers and sisters all around are suffering just as you are. What you need to know about that word is this. The suffering that he's talking about is not like, oh, I'm suffering through a bad day because my kids won't listen to me. He's not talking about suffering because someone cut you off on the path on your donkey on the way to work that day. He's not talking about the suffering of the burnt toast that happened that morning. No, what he's talking about here is that the early Christians in this moment are actually facing persecution for their faith, which means they are being put in jail, which means they're being beaten, and some of them are losing their lives for their faith. Gives you some perspective, doesn't it? That the early Christians, the ones that he's writing to, were experiencing this newfound faith and life in Jesus. They were trying to figure that out. How does it fit? What does it look like? And they're living in the tension of living in the real world where social and economical standards were going against them. There's misunderstanding. And so they faced, every time they walked out of their home, they faced the possibility of persecution, jail, and even death. And then he says, just give all your cares and worries to God because he cares for you. Kind of sounds nice, doesn't it? It's like super cliche. Let's put it on a bumper sticker. Slap it on the back of your donkey. I don't know where that came from, but it's just there. We got a hitching post out back. I don't know. In the midst of all this, in the midst of the suffering, in the midst of the persecution, in the midst of the confusion, in the midst of not knowing what to do, in the midst of what? Anxiety, worry, discouragement, depression, whatever it was that they were facing, he says, give all your cares and worries to God because he cares for you. Do you think he meant it? Do you think it's possible? See, one of the things that Peter is encouraging them to do and challenging them to do is a very powerful thing. He is saying this. The word actually give, he says, give all your worries, is this idea of casting all your cares. So it's like fishing. Like I went fishing. I had a fishing trip earlier in in August, and we were fishing, and I would take the fishing rod, I'd put the lure on the end of it, and I would cast it out into the water. Peter's saying, take your worries, take your anxiety, take your cares, take the loop of the mindset, and he says, cast it onto God. Worries, anxiety, cast it onto him. Why? Because we were not designed to carry the anxieties and worries of life. We were not created for these anxieties and for these worries. Peter's trying to paint a very clear picture that this is not something that you are to carry around in your backpack of life. That you are to take these things and you are to cast them. The big cares, the little cares, all parts of the cares, cast them means that we can actually experience this newfound care that God wants to give to us. That's an important part of this. Is the care that we cast on God is because why? Because he cares for us. This is interesting because the care that God has for us is a powerful care that can be misunderstood because the care that he's talking about is the watchfulness and the intensity of the affection for the one he's caring for. This is what he speaks about, the watchfulness and the interest with affection for the one that he cares for. It's kind of like this. Is my microphone doing something? It's really bothering me. Is it bothering you? No? Fine, let's move on then. Oh man, I wish these things wouldn't happen to me. Anyway, the care and the watchfulness, sorry Exeter, the care and the watchfulness is a very interesting thing because, let me explain it this way to you. That's where I was. Imagine that we're at the playground together. Okay? Imagine your kids are there, and I'm there drinking my tall True North Starbucks coffee. You have your whatever coffee you're drinking, and we're just sitting there, we're sipping coffee, and your kid's playing on the playground. Okay? Now, you're watching your kid different than I am. Like, you're intensely watching with affection and care, right? You're watchful. Because why? You want to make sure that your kid doesn't do onto the ground, right? Now, if that happens, you are probably going to run to your child before I do. Right? And before you think that I don't care about your kid, I would probably saunter over. I would look, see if there's no blood, tell the kid to get up, move on. Just ask my kids, that's how I dealt with things. No blood, just move on. Except for the broken arm once, which was another story. But anyway. See, what is so powerful about this idea is that when we're coming all together now, when we take our anxiety, our worry, our cares, and we cast them onto God, what happens is this, that the care of God absorbs our anxiety and our worry, and therefore what happens is when he absorbs our anxiety and our worries, our lives begin to fill with peace, contentment, satisfaction, joy, and love, and the list keeps going. When I realized that this week, when I realized what he was trying to help us understand is that when I take all of this, whatever this is, that keeps me up at night, that wakes me up in the morning, where it's always there, if I cast it onto God, his care absorbs it. This is the message of the Christian faith. Like, if you're new to this, if you're trying to figure out the Christian faith, this is the message of the Christian faith. It's such a powerful message that the Christian faith is literally absorbing our lives and giving us new life. It's taking our sin, our brokenness, and absorbing it. That's what Jesus did when he came to this earth and he went to a cross, he went to a tomb, and he walked out of the tomb 3 days later. It was not for just a good God trick. It was for absorbing our sin, our brokenness, our shame, our anxiety, our worry. He took it on himself. himself. Peter talks about this in the verse over in chapter 2, verse 24. It's not going to be on the screen. It's an add-on. He says, he personally carried our sins in his body on the cross so that we can be dead to sin and live for what is right. By his wounds we are healed. This is the message of the Christian faith. It's about God absorbing, taking our stuff and giving us new life. It's this powerful transaction that takes place. That we can actually be absorbed by God and that he can fill us up. So listen, last week I did a thing where I had people text their breakthrough stuff to me on my phone, which is a big risk, giving my phone number out. Thank you for not abusing it this week, which is great. There were some things that people talked about, that they need a breakthrough, and that creates that anxiety and that worry in them. It's the future. You're in school and you're like, the debt is climbing and you're just not sure if you're even going to go down this path when you're done university or college, and you're like not even sure what to do with this, this load of debt, and you're like, what am I going to do? My future, I just don't know. You can take that and just cast it onto God. Other things were like money and job and family. For me, it's like starting a second location for us as a church, and maybe even starting a third. It's about parenting. Will I be enough? I have a tough conversation. My marriage, my retirement. I even have anxiety about coming to church or faith. Am I doing this right? One of the most beautiful things is that we can take these things and we can cast them onto him and allow him to absorb them. But here's the problem. There's a couple things. For some of us, I'm not convinced that we believe that God actually cares about all parts of us. I'm not convinced we are. I'm pretty sure that there are some of us, and I hear this from people sometimes, they'll say to me, like, I got to get cleaned up before I come to church. Because we're convinced that God doesn't care about those ugly parts of us. We look at our own relationships and we kind of go, okay, I really like the good qualities of you. Like when you bring me like a True North tall black coffee from Starbucks, I just love that part of you. I like when you say nice things about me. Or, you like it when your coworker brings you that muffin into your cubicle. It's like, I like that part. But then it's the ugly parts. We kind of go, no, I don't like that part of that person. Do you see how the way they talk, the way they behave? See how it manages? See what she does? It's like, we don't like that part. And so we think that's the same with God. God cares about every part of you. Your past, your brokenness, your bumps, your bruises, your addictions, your anxiety, your worry, your stress. He cares about all of it. No. I'm so used to carrying this around. I just can't do this. This is so familiar to me, this anxiety, this worry. I just don't know if I can even move on without it. Okay, fine, then I'll give it once, and if God doesn't do anything, then see, he didn't work. It didn't work. And so we pick it back up again, and we pull it over our shoulders, and we trudge through life going, I got to hang on to this. Okay, let's try it again. See, here's the thing. God cares for you, but it's a process of learning to cast it onto him. It's not just a one-time thing. Although it would be nice if it was. It is a process of learning to cast on him, that when anxiety and worry begins to creep in, it's like, throw it away. That was a horrible noise. You cast it. I was talking to Rick Boys. He's a pastor at Gateway. My wife and I hung out with him and his wife a few weeks ago. We were having just great time hanging out, and I didn't realize he was a fly fisherman. I was like, what? You don't look like a fly fisherman. But anyway, don't even know what a fly fisherman looks like. But and he started describing the exercise of fly fishing. And he started doing this motion, and then he said it's all about muscle memory. And I thought, wow. My learning to cast my anxieties, my worries onto God is an exercise of the muscle memory that I can cast back and forth, back and forth. That over time, what happens is, I'm not even sure if that's the right motion or not. If you're a fly fisherman, I apologize. But over time, you begin to develop the pattern. It's interesting how this works. Man, this is real time. This morning, I woke up at 3 o'clock, and I had this thing in my gut. It was just like, I woke up anxious. I woke up worried. I don't even know why. It was just there. And then my brain started spinning. And it started spinning, and I don't even know what it was spinning on. And I literally felt my heart starting to pound harder. And I'm lying there. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm preaching on cast your cares upon God because He cares for you today. What is my problem? And so literally in that moment, I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to cast this on you because you care. You want to absorb this. And then the thing came back. I'm like, no. And then I cast it back on. And I had to practice this muscle memory. See, so oftentimes we're just so accustomed to this anxiety and this worry. It's all we know, but we've got to learn to cast it so that He could absorb it into our lives, His peace, His joy. But there's one last thing that I think is absolutely essential to this conversation. And it's almost like it's the catch. And you're going to like, I knew it. I knew there was a catch to this. The catch is this. If we are going to overcome our anxiety, if we're going to have a breakthrough with our anxiety and our worry and our anxiousness and all that, you know what? It can only, that's too harsh. That's, how do I say this? You have a greater potential of this happening if you enter into relationship with others. See, isolation will not help you overcome your anxiety. The people that heard these words in 1 Peter chapter 5 did not go back to their tent going, I got to cast my care upon God because He cares for me. You know what they did? They leaned into community and connection. They leaned into relationships with one another. They knew that in order to face the suffering, in order to face the struggles, the anxiety, the worry, the persecution, they had to find each other. Because it's within one another that we are able to find the strength and the hope that we can get into a space where we can say, I'm struggling with X. I'm having a hard time with anxiety. Fear is overtaking me. I'm terrified of the future. And someone can look at us and go, I hear you. I'm with you. I know exactly what it's like. Listen, I dream of the day when at all of our locations, people begin to move towards connection, because in connection is the strength and the power and the holy sacred dance of the one another. Peter even says that we are living stones. We are the spiritual temple of God, that when we enter into these spaces and risk the transparency with one another and say, I can't do this anymore, we find others that go, I will walk with you. I'm not going to fix you. I'm not going to try to carry your backpack for you, but I will walk with you. I almost feel like I got to preach this until I win. I'm competitive. I hate losing. I don't know why I just rolled up my sleeves. We're going to fight now. Our Western mindset is, oh, you got this on your own, man. Like, you just go and find yourself at a tent somewhere, self-realized, self-help. What a load of come on. Really? I think it's time we stop making excuses about our time. Too busy. I got a busy schedule. It's like your BS, right? Your busy schedule. Our church is, man, it's not perfect by any stretch, and I get it. It's not for everybody. And we need to give room for people in their journey, and that's great. But I am convinced the more we can move people towards smaller environments, that becomes the church. This is great. Keep doing this, but this isn't church. It's not the completion of church. I want you to come back next week. What are you going to do to break this cycle of anxiety and worry in your life? What are you going to do to move towards community? And one of the things that we do here is we love to push people towards serving. And listen, it's not just to get tasks done, although that's part of it, but it's moving towards connection. I have seen so many people find a faith connection and a connection with relationship that brings hope and realness and life because the person made the step and got involved. What's your breakthrough today? What's your breakthrough with anxiety? Maybe it's the continuation of casting your care to learn what it's like to experience the care of God. And maybe it's the movement towards the connection that you are praying and asking God that will bring you life and hope and turn the dial back. Oh, I almost forgot to finish my air conditioning story. I got to tell you what happened. I called my uncle and I said, "What's up with the air conditioning?" He goes, "Ron, the humidity absorbs in your entire house. Your furniture, your carpet, your walls. The air conditioner needed time to extract the humidity from your house." I'm like, what? Okay. Do you know when humidity is showing up in the forecast, we lock the house down. Shut the windows, close the doors, set the temperature. There ain't no humidity getting in my house anymore. Is it possible that you need to lock down and say, anxiety, worry, no more? You have no place. It's possible that you can have that breakthrough. Listen to this song.
Among the shadows, you wiped my tears away, and I felt the pain of heartbreak, and I've seen the brighter days, and I prayed prayers to heaven from my lowest place, and I have held your blessings. God, you give and take away. No matter what I have, your grace is enough. No matter where I am, I'm standing in your love. On the mountains I will bow my life to the one who sees me there. On the valley I will lift my eyes to the one who sees me there. When I'm standing on the mountain, I didn't get there on my own. When I'm walking through the valley, I know I am not alone. You're God of the hills and valleys, God of the hills and valleys, and I am not alone. I've watched my dreams get broken,